All right, welcome to the long-awaited, highly debated Q3, Q4 planning period. So again, this is very intricate, very detailed. I would highly suggest you watch this on 2x speed, take some notes, and then watch it twice. The first part, just really begin to absorb, what is the nature of 2024? What is it looking like? What do we need to be prepared for? And then come back again and begin to take action on some of the step-by-step items. Now, again, this is a culmination of the last 4 years doing this, really finding both value and looking back to see what happened in 2020, what are some of the things that happened in 22 and 23, and what should we take into account into 24. So with this, there's really two important distinctions. The first is understanding the nature of media buying, right? Now, you may not be a media buyer. You're likely either a brand owner or your content delivery, some aspect of the business, but it's really, really helpful to understand what are the algorithms leaning towards in 24, and then why is creative so important, right? Why do I need to focus on that? And then beyond that, we'll take that into tactical action, how you can plan, what you should be working on, and when you should be working on it. Now, it's never going to be perfect. I would always suggest, this isn't like a perfect magic 8-ball. This is really a culmination of what did we see in prior years? What did it do? And what was the impact? And then what should you be looking for? So with that, again, let's jump in and we're going to start understanding what is the algorithms, why is there such a focus on creative, and then from that, how do I begin to take action now? So let's jump in. And if I didn't cover this, my name's Justin. I'm at AdSquad. We've been in the space for a long time. We work with a lot of big brands and we spend a lot of big bucks. So with that, we have a little insight into what has produced success in the past and what's produced failures in the past for brands that we've worked with. So the goal is always to iterate, improve, and scale. Let's jump in. Okay, so let's talk algorithms. Let's talk media buying. Whatever you're doing, you have to understand the algorithms that are Google, Meta, TikTok to a degree, Twitter, all of those that really are the top of your funnel, right? Where you get customers. And so I'm going to take you on a little journey. And this journey really leads to where things are now in 24. So the first is 2020, right? We all saw the boom of e-com, right? Stores closed, COVID was here, but consumers were buying, right? They were just buying in mass. And there was really no competition. So in this, we saw this massive spike in e-com. We saw everything from drop shipping. It didn't matter. You just threw something up and you had success. It's great. Then came the era of ad hacking. Now, ad hacking was we would hack the system. We would take the data. We had this perfect drip where someone saw a site, hit with remarketing, omnipresent. Things were beautiful. And it was an amazing time. But with every high, there is a low. In 22, retail really came back in mass. And when they came back, it was at the same time the pixel began to degrade, die. And so as it died, there was a mass exodus of those in e-commerce. And really all of the algorithms, Meta, Google, really were scratching their heads to say, okay, we've got all these privacy laws. We really dabbled in things we shouldn't. We knew too much and we took advantage of way too much. And now we're getting reprimanded. And so we saw what was degradation of advertising go from like a 90% effectiveness down to like 40 to 50%. It was terrible. And this really led us to believe, okay, is it dead? But what we learned in that process was you have to have a good product, good COGS, and really the basics of marketing. So think, not everyone's going to know Ogilvy, but he's like one of those early advertisers that says, okay, hey, you have to really resonate with the problem that someone's got. You've got to really have a good solution. If you don't, you're selling snake oil. And so that began all of us to understand, okay, we have to have things that speak to our customers better. We have our blinders on because we don't know what we don't know, but we have to begin exploring. That concept led to 23, which is broad is best. Broad is best really meant you take everything that you've got, you just throw it out there to the masses, and you let these algorithms find who the best customer is. Now, it wasn't always the best, secret. But what Meta was doing primarily over Google was they were seeding all of this testing to build the algorithm to best find consumers when the pixel has died. A lot of people don't have consumer data and they're new brands. And so what Broad is Best did is it fed the algorithm. Now, there is a onus and it's put on the brand. And the onus is this. The algorithm now is much better than it was in 22. And it's much better than it was in 23, but the onus is now on you to say, feed the algorithm. What does the algorithm eat? Creative. So it's saying you don't know how to find your customers, but you have to learn frameworks to speak to your customers. And if you have those frameworks, pair that with a really effective algorithm and you're going to have more success. Now, why is that important? Most people shrug off creative and they're just like, oh, it's kind of important. And they put about like 10% of their focus on creative when it should be the other way. It should be 25 to 30% of creative and heavy creative testing so you can feed the algorithm what it likes. What's the impact of that? CPM. CPMs are the cost to reach an audience. If you have really good, highly engaging, it matches and it entertains your consumers, you get rewarded with that. And what's the reward? Lower cost. So that is what we're looking at with 24. Let's dive into an overview so you can begin to say, okay, got it. The algorithm's smarter now. That's great. Let's dive into when and how I should be testing creative and what are some dates to look out for, because CPMs, the cost to reach 1,000 plus people, are going to spike. In 2020, we saw this because it was an election year and there was a rise of political ads, right? And no one was really going to physical. So it became this massive battleground everywhere online. We're going to see a lot of that now. We're going to see a lot of people pushing online, in particular, political ads. And there's going to be big spikes that we need to look out for. So with that, let's jump over and let's look at the calendar. Okay, so here's the calendar, and it gets detailed month over month, but this is what's really helpful for you to understand. Here's the critical items. Creative matters more. It matters more than it did in 20, 21, 22, and 23. It matters the most now. It also really encourages you to enter with distinct creative. Why? Because if you have the same exact static white background, here's my product, you are lost in the noise. It will never break through. Next, frameworks. What is a framework? A framework is understanding what does your product do, problem solution, what does your product do in terms of awareness, what and how can you break the noise with both a framework and distinct creative so you can get people to click and give them entertainment throughout the process. And then the next, of course, and this is something that we're going to stress throughout this, is have a plan A and a plan B. Panic never produces really good results. It just never does. Have a plan A and a plan B. Last, building customer relationships. The days where you don't really have to build a customer relationship. You're just like, you're a dumb customer. I'm going to put a product on there. You're going to click buy because you don't know how to think. Those days are going away. Your customers are now not exposed to something for the first time. They've seen it 7, 8 times. What makes you distinct becomes really important. And do you have a relationship? Do you know how to speak to me? Do you know what I like, what I trust, and what I buy consistently? If you don't have that, if you're not developing that, you're really going to suffer. If you do, you're going to have massive advantage. So, all right, with that, let's take an overview into what and how you should begin formulating your plans. First is August. This is a heavy month of creative and frameworks. We'll go a little bit more into depth of what those frameworks are, but August should be massively focused on your creative and your frameworks. Why? Because you're not going to have time and you're not going to have a budget to do a ton of this broad-based creative framework testing in October, in September, because that's where your costs are going to pick up. Different than last Q4 where November was the spike, you're going to see spikes in October. Next, September, plan A and plan B. Let's work it out. AOV, COGS, product, logistics. What is our A? What is our B? October, different than last year, CPMs and election ads. You're going to see a lot of political ads in October. You're going to see them in September pop up during debates, but you're really going to see them in October. Next, November. What and how should you be planning for your high budget, mid-budget, and low budget? And we'll go through what does that mean and what are some of the sales you need to be looking out for. And then, of course, December is going to be the very much get it by Christmas. You're going to have a lot of seasonality, big push. You have really big dead periods and then really big Q5 periods. How and when do you jump into each of those? All right, so with that, let's jump into August and let's get an overview of what this looks like. So here you have the first week of August. I'm going to minimize my face here and let's start looking. So in the very beginning of August, and I would encourage you if you're in July watching this to start now, start soon. You should have creative testing period and you need to establish winning frameworks. If not, just on awareness and problem solution, you need to understand what is a winning framework, how do you produce it, how do you get it, and what do you do so you know exactly what to produce in these high periods. So with that, let's jump over and do a really quick overview on what is a framework and how do you creatively understand that. Okay, so here we are at a funnel. Like everyone's used to the funnel being top of funnel cold, middle of funnel warm. It's not like that anymore. It's not clean, but the concepts are really still the same. So if you look at your funnel, it should be a little bit broader, especially with the algorithm changes. You mostly have awareness. And then down here, in terms of your ad creative, you're going to have people who are aware, and some need to be brought into awareness of problem. Awareness of solution, awareness of your solution. Then as you get further down the funnel, you're going to understand what is an objection, an ad for product awareness. And then lastly, those for repurchase and for loyalty. The biggest and most important are this. You need to have these distinct types of ads because they do a lot. One, people are aware of customer products, but UGC is really bridging a lot of the gap for awareness and product solution. Why? Because it looks like people they know, they talk like people they know, and it bridges the gap of understanding that people who are knowing they're being sold to are able to really consume it easier because there's so much that's happening to them. They're getting sold by so much. So if you sell to someone like a best friend sells it, which is what the basis of UGC is, it's easier for them to digest, which is why those problems are why that type of creative is really booming and really succeeding. But what's a framework, right? So a framework would look like this. And here's an example. What problems do your customers have? If you can't specifically go beyond just like they love my product. No. What problems do your customers have? Here's an energy drink. Here's a problem I have. I have a crash around 1 p.m. Right? I just finished lunch. I'm tired. That's a problem I have. Now let's be a little more specific. I hate the taste of most energy drinks, but we all know I need the solution, which is energy drink. You could take it a step further. And so as you go through that, you need to have a framework of saying, here's a problem my customers have. So let's produce ads, UGC, that answers that problem. That's a sample framework. Now, this isn't a creative development, overview. This is really Q4 framework. But when you're here and you're looking at your creative testing period, you need to establish winning frameworks, which means you've produced creative, you tested creative, and you can walk away by saying, this works. This problem solution framework works. So you're not coming into August going like, okay, we're going to build an ad that looks like this. No, you've built it, you've produced it, and you've tested it. That's what you're doing in August. Now let's take it a step further. In the second week of August, you need to be testing lower funnel. Again, back over here, you need to be testing ads for objection, product and awareness, repurchase, and loyalty. That way you're down here and you've not only got winning frameworks for what's at your top or awareness or problem solution, you're also creating frameworks for static-based ads. Why is that important? You're going to have a bunch of sales. You're going to have a bunch of times that people have seen this and they need to get over that line. So both of these 2 weeks, you should be establishing and creating. Now, I always encourage people to create, test, and run quickly as opposed to waiting, well, we'll start talking about it now and we'll develop it in September. September's too late. You should begin testing these frameworks quick, fast, or working with your creative team to begin to establish these frameworks. Have these conversations now so these frameworks can begin to enact. You can do both in the same month. You could do one every 2 weeks, but you really need to focus on August as your framework testing period. Next, now that you're getting lower into the month of August and you're getting a little bit more into this month, you're always testing, you're always scaling, you really need to begin looking at your funnel. Now, funnel, think of it like your sales funnel, your email funnel, your fulfillment, your retention. Every step of that process, you need to look at how and what can you do to upgrade. Upgrading this now, an ounce of prevention is worth its weight in, having to react. It applies here. So if you're looking at your email series, if you're looking at your post-purchase series, these are things that are really helpful because they will make massive difference so we don't have to spend our way to something that could have been done in email. So what I would always encourage is this. These are different teams, right? These are different individuals. You have your creative testing, your CDs. They're working on all of this. Bring your funnel testing period into the limelight now and say, where can we raise the bar? What is underperforming? Is my email converting at 33% of all my sales? Is my email converting at 5%? This is where you look at the lowest hanging fruit in your funnel and say, I want to upgrade. Now, I wouldn't encourage you to upgrade everything all at once. Now, pick 2 areas of low performance and focus on this at the end of August because once we get into September, you're going to need it performing. All right, so with that, that's mostly structural, which you're going to see here in purple. Let's talk about testing. Early in, this is mid Q3, you want to begin your top of funnel samples and testing. Why? Because you want to be able to copy and paste that at different times in the year. So what we encourage our brands to do is we're going to take our promotion. Like, what is our promotion? What is our Black Friday promotion? What are we anticipating pushing early Black Friday or pre-Black Friday? We take that and we run a sample testing period, typically at the end of August. Why? Because there's nothing happening in August, and it's your way to create your wave of movement. So typically, either the last week or the second to last week of August, we'll take an early testing period right smack in the middle of that week, and we're going to run our promo test. So this looks like a 20%, a 30%, a BOGO, a 20%. Now again, we want to know all these numbers, and we'll get into that in September, but we want to run what we anticipate our Black Friday promo to be, and we can, sample test it. We can run it 2 days. We can run it a week, but what we're wanting to do is say, how do our customers existing or new respond to this? And typically we lean on the new, because if this is our testing consumer base, we understand our frameworks, and we run a 20% off and they react wonderfully, it's going to be dynamic for us. But if they react poorly, it's also something we want to learn in August. So this end of the period, we're going to run that test. We're going to take notes and we're going to see what happened that was good and what happened that was bad. What was impacted? Did our AOV jump? Did our COGS maintain? Did our AOV dip and people just took advantage of the sale? Because what we do now is going to be magnified when we run it full funnel. All right, let's keep going. All right, so at the very end of August, we like to take advantage of Labor Day. Why? Because big box stores do a bunch of Labor Day sales, right? It's where they begin to gauge their audience. If you're a CD, if you're creating any testing frameworks, this is a really great chance to test a middle of funnel offer. And so a middle of funnel offer could be comparable to what you just ran for top of funnel, but typically they're distinct, meaning you're going to run top of funnel that's never going to see the middle of funnel offer, and you're going to run a middle of funnel that's never going to touch the top of funnel, because you're testing, you're sampling, right? And middle of funnel, just for lack of understanding, has an awareness of your brand. They just haven't jumped over the line. Maybe they've got their email, their SMS, their phone number, but they haven't jumped over the line. That's distinct. Bottom is existing returning customer. So your early funnel test, you're going to test some of those frameworks of what works best. Your middle, think about your dynamic remarketing, your static, think about your catalog, like what can you do to really get them over the line? We sample that over Labor Day. And typically what we find is the winning combination produces high COGS, low COGS, high AOV, and we take those winnings now and we apply them once we get into our Black Friday period. We just may add a percentage or whatever it is. So let's shift over to September. Now again, September, plan A, plan B. Structurally, this is what you need to be doing in September. AOVs, bundles, conversion rate, and pre and post purchase is solidified. So when you're running these sample top funnel tests, you not only have to know your baseline COGS, you have to know the impact of those COGS magnified. Now, if you're running 20% off, that's obviously going to hit your bottom line. Is it more beneficial or is it less beneficial? That's plan A. Work it out with what you've tested. What will happen if we add a 0, 2 zeros to everything that we just did? Then, now let's move into plan B. Plan B is, what if we start running this and the CPM spike? What do we iterate to? Do we drop the sale? Do we keep the sale? Do we adjust the sale? Do we have a sale for top of funnel exposure and then a sale for email and retention? You then can walk away from September with not only knowing your frameworks, what your CPMs are, what's working, you know structurally and internally what it is that you're doing to be able to iterate. Panic never produces results. So that's your plan A and your plan B. And it's going to take some time, a lot more time than you think, to really establish those AOVs. And you've got numbers to match it because you just ran your early top of funnel tests. So you can say, okay, this was our result. Let's take that with an AOV. Let's look at our COGS. Let's look at our numbers and see if that makes an impact. There you go. Now to the top of September, you really want to look at this. What did your Labor Day middle of funnel sale produce? Then let's solidify any of those creative and testing bundles, because we don't want to do creative testing, product testing, primary product testing in October. So at that first part of September, you want to have that established. Then what you're doing is you are running those frameworks that work and you're continually producing that throughout September. September is going to be one of the last months that's similar to last year. It's not going to be the same, but it is similar to last year. So as you're producing these results, you should continue pushing. Some brands are pushing early in terms of what their promos are going to be in September. They would take what they're doing in October and they're pushing it in. So that would look like October sales, fall sales, and they're running those earlier. Now, one thing that you need to look out for in September is there's presidential debates. During these debates, there's going to be high CPM spikes. I know the last debate is scheduled for, I think it's the 10th of September. we need to be on the lookout for that. So what does that mean? For you, we want to begin being cautious and aware on the media buying side, but you also want to preempt that. Now, if you're a brand that can relate to the times, this would be a really good time for organic-based push if you're speaking back and forth to election-based CPMs. You can ride the wave. All right, now let's keep going. For September, big thing you want to do is heavily focus on Plan A, Plan B. October. So this is probably the, I don't want to say scariest month, but it's probably going to be one of the most interesting months we've had in about 4 years. So if you have a low budget and you know you're not going to spend $1 million in the month of November, let's say you're going to spend 20 grand, right? I would really encourage you to not fight with everyone that's going to be fighting, but fight smart in October with whatever promotions you've got. So what we're shifting a lot of our brands into, those who have good brand voice, good nurture, good email, they've really shored that up, is we are pushing a lot of lead gen campaigns in October. And you're saying lead gen campaigns, why lead gen campaigns? Because if they're interested in buying your product now, I want to get all their data before I push into a heavy sales period where I've got to pay to get that data. We're also going to integrate some fall product pushes, but we're going to be smart. Why? Because last year and the year prior, there was Prime Day. Like if you look at July, the first half of July, Amazon was spending like $1 billion in advertising to get everybody to wait until Prime Day. And so when they begin releasing that, which is like 1 to 2 weeks before, you begin to see nobody buying. It's like everything just slows down. Now, Amazon does it for a reason because they like to spark consumer buying. And for them, they've created their own waves. We want to pay attention to that wave. So in the beginning, we're shifting to our lead gen campaigns. We're introducing concept. People are opting in because a lot of people are waiting in this period. After, I think it's like the 9th or the 10th, we'll see. You know, they always drop it like a week or so before. That's just going to make everyone stop buying that weekend. So more than likely, 5th, 6th, 7th, you're going to have no one buy because they're waiting on Prime Day. They're like, ooh, I'm going to do all my Christmas shopping here. You'll see it. So as you're getting consumers who are interested, lead gen campaigns, they're still going to be waiting, but they want your product. How and what should you do during that period is really important. So if we mirror Prime Day, meaning we have either an Amazon presence or we want to counter an Amazon presence from, let's say, competitors, all of these lead gen campaigns are going to go directly into a retention promo during that Prime Day period. But you want to be wary of loss of sale because you don't want to feed Amazon. You want to pull from Amazon and you want to ride the same wave that Amazon's created. Because what they're doing is they're jump starting the Q3 sales period. And so in this period, you jump in if you are, I guess, a complemented brand to what Amazon's doing. When you see an Amazon spike and you see a good pushback from that, you have unique products, you have something distinct, or you're on Amazon, this is when you go live on all the lead gen campaigns. And this is when you pull everyone down in a retention strategy. And you can have some remarketing strategy. I would not really push heavy on top of funnel cold exposure because you're going to lose to Amazon unless you have a really good Amazon presence and you know whatever the push is going to happen, you're going to benefit from that. Next, as you move down into October, it's really important to note election ads are going to start hitting really heavy in October. What they did in 2020 is they began to spike all throughout. Anytime there was anything, like every ad in especially battleground states, you have to watch the states, the ads start to get ridiculous. And we would see it in like a geographical breakdown. I think it was like the state of Pennsylvania and then like Indiana and random states, their CPMs were through the roof. And so we were cautious of that. And so as you're cautious, we began to shift and scale where we were winning. West Coast, East Coast, just different regions where we saw things winning. And another thing I would really push, international. Like if you could push international sales, October's a great month. Why? Because it is going to be crickets in a lot of other countries. So we shifted to some European-based countries. We shifted to Australia. We shifted to some of the other countries that we saw that were winning. Scale where you're winning. Now, again, back to creative. These frameworks that you're producing, if you know and you are aware of other countries that are possible winners, this would be a really good time to push that because in October, your CPM stateside, especially in the battleground states, are going to get very, very high. So iterate. Don't wait for these things to just surprise you. Have a plan in advance. So let's say you're producing like 30, 40 pieces of creative and you've got a pretty good presence in Europe and a good presence in Australia or wherever. Produce a few creatives that will resonate with those audiences, resonate with the demographics. Don't wait. Have a plan. Again, plan A, plan B. If you're not winning in the US, it doesn't mean consumers have stopped buying because they all take part in the sales that are happening. So that being said, scale where you're winning, we anticipate low to mid CPMs during this period. Later in the month, high CPM periods. So this means when you're typically getting a $20, $30 CPM, you could be at like a 40, 50 at low and a 60 to an 80 at high. Basically, everything that used to cost $1 now costs $2 and 3 or 4 or 5. So plan on that. Only scale where you're winning and don't just blindly scale because last year it worked. Last October, we didn't have a big election. This October, we do. And the election is really pushing up to the beginning of November. So end of this month, this is your high CPM period. You're going to see a different Halloween-based sales than you did last year. We normally push a lot of Halloween sales. We like to sample, push really hard. Not this year. We're probably going to be shifting into scaling where we're winning and shifting into lead gen. Why? Because lead gen, we're getting the same consumers who are interested, who are tired of seeing political ads, but they're resonating with our creative, are still winning our product. Let's get to November. All right, so November, I'm going to go back over here to our timeline. Cautious of the consumer CPMs. Now we're getting out of the election CPMs, but we're also stepping into all of our competitor and consumer CPMs and other sales. So this is helpful for you to look at in really a few frameworks. Do you have low budget? Low budget means you're competing against Coca-Cola and you don't have $1 billion, right? So you're saying, I'm going to spend 20 grand, 30 grand. Mid to high budget means I'm going to spend 50 grand, 60 grand, maybe up to 100 grand. Really, and this is relative to your brand. Like if you're going to spend 25% of your whole budget, that would be high. But look at what the CPMs are going to be comparable to your brand. So if you're stepping into a highly competitive space, you would probably shift into mid to low. If you're in a competitive space and you're, let's say, the dominant player, you would dominate on most of these into the high period. All right, so here's how we break it up. The major elections, the ads and CPMs are going to be just chaos up through around the 5th. And also interesting, daylight savings ends during this period. So I don't doubt there's going to be a lot of really funny nurture, retention, lead gen campaigns where it's like daylight savings is over. Our daylight saving sales are happening. So if you can play into that and you understand trends and how to run with what's happening, great period. If not, stay away from it. If you have a low budget, I would really encourage our low budget brands, meaning you're not pushing 25% of your spend. Q4 is like kind of hit or miss. This is where your push is. Right after the election period is over, your CPMs just go from $122, like if they're normally 30, down to 15, 20, right? It's just boom, it just hits the floor. This is where you make your push. The 6th, all the way through that next week, you are doing your early Black Friday. Get Black Friday early. That's your push. For creative and development, you need to know, are we a low budget? Are we going to start our Black Friday sale early? Are we going to wait and compete in low budget, mid budget, high budget period? And if you're going to compete across the board, have your budget breakdown. So typically for us, that looks like this. If we're a Q4 period, we would want to use our November budget. We would want to use 25% of it in the first 2 weeks. Then we want to use like maybe 50 to 75% of that budget over the high Black Friday period. And then we're going to have a little tail end percentage depending on our swing of like 10%. Now you're saying, wait a minute, that doesn't equal 100%. We want to be able to push the gas on like a good 20 to 25% of our remaining budget where we're seeing wins. If we're not seeing wins, we're not going to burn that budget. We're going to shift it into Q5. So, all right, low budget push here. Mid-budget push is really in this week prior. So November looks a little different this year. I think, our Black Friday is really right at the tail end of November versus last year. And so what that's going to do is it's going to create this really nice clean period where you have a mid-budget push where you're going to say, our Black Friday starts the 17th, blah, 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 blah. You're shifting on all that lead gen. That's going to shift all the way to what's typically like the 26th. Black Friday sales typically start the day before Thanksgiving Day. And you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. That's what we're seeing with big box. That's what everyone's seeing with the big push. So if you've got a big budget, high budget push, that's when competition starts heavily. All the way through Thanksgiving into Black Friday. It used to be a really distinct period where everyone was like sitting on their phones after Thanksgiving. That stopped. I don't know when it stopped, but it stopped. So for you and your brand, look at your budget breakdown, begin to understand what is this for you, what is your budget distribution, and when will you begin pushing the majority of your budget push, and really gauging the audiences, because CPMs are going to be high throughout November. We know that. but the high budget is when the highest CPM periods are. Mid budget's when typically the CPMs are climbing, and low budget's where they're higher than a standard month, but they're not astronomically high. Other thing to note, CPMs are not the end all. Consumers are buying, which is why CPMs are up. When other people are bidding, it's because consumers are buying. And so I'm not telling you to just hide away from that period, but I am telling you to be smart about it. So, all right, let's move into December. Back to our overview. December is very much a get it by Christmas. Consumers really have this mindset that if they're buying in this time, if they're buying early in December, they want to get it before Christmas, even if it doesn't have to do with Christmas. I don't know why consumers are like that, but they really want to get everything in, get it all done, get it all organized, get it on a shelf, and then we step into Q5. Love Q5. Q5 is honestly some of the areas where we have the most wins. So let's look at December. Post Black Friday sale typically continues to the first week. It ends Thursday. Some brands ended on Monday, Tuesday, but it continues into that first week of December. Then it shifts. Get it by Christmas sales. This is your best performing frameworks with Get It by Christmas. I can't believe I have this product. It's the perfect gift. All of that creative should be done well into early November so you can run it in the Get It by Christmas period. Now, in terms of your creative delivery and frameworks, that needs to still match what works, but you're talking to the consumer about the Christmas period. Get It by Christmas is great. Then you enter dead zone. Dead zone is typically the 2, 3, or sometimes 4 or 5 days before Christmas. That's when your shipping can't get it there, and consumers are just like, I'm not going to get it in time. I'm going to wait. You shouldn't be waiting. In the dead zone, yes, enjoy Christmas with your family, but you need to begin understanding how Q5 works. Q5 works like this. The day after Christmas, all these consumers are still on a high, right? They just got all these gifts. They got gift cards. They got cash. They got things that in the giving spirit created this space in their mind that, well, we got this, but we didn't get that. Or, I bought all the kids gifts, but I didn't buy me a gift. And so if you're selling to the 45-year-old female, this is a money-making period. Back to November. If you didn't have a big winning period there, you shift and roll that budget into December. If you didn't have a good Get It by Christmas, you shift and roll it into Q5. Why? The budget starts January 1st, right? If you're a fitness, if you're a budget, if you're a improve yourself, January 1st is when that starts. If you're not, this is a period where people are really splurging because they know they're about to tighten the belt. So they intentionally splurge before they tighten the belt. So if you're a brand that didn't have your massive success, you didn't sell out in November, Get It by Christmas, shift all of that budgetary breakdown into Q5. With one of our brands, we did like close to $1 million just in this period because we didn't have massive success and we knew our consumer, our demographic, typically is buying gifts for other people. Then when they're done and they don't get what they want, they treat themselves. Q5 is a treat yourself period for the people who are buying the gifts. So really just stepping all the way out. I know this is getting super long-winded. Anticipate. Make a plan A, build your creative frameworks, and then plan around October. It's going to be a weird October. And most of where the consumers are, they're going to either hide, or your other competitor brands, they're going to hide when CPMs are high. They're going to fire people in October thinking it was their fault when it's not. It's elections. And then they're going to panic spend in November. Have a plan. Panic spending never produces results. So have a plan. Your creative is the most important thing going into this Q3, Q4 period. So if you don't have a framework, if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a budgetary breakdown, at least focus on creative because that you will win with the algorithm in 24. So again, this has been super long-winded. I hope there's value in here you can begin to really extract for your brand. And if not, I wish you the best of luck. Either way, it's going to be an awesome Q4. Talk to you later.